Welcome to 5 Minutes in the Word, a daily devotional in the Word of God.
Derek, one character in particular that we've studied, that we studied as part of a group, but not really individually, is Judas. And Judas has a very interesting story, as we know. But tell us a little bit more about Judas.
Well, Judas, obviously, he's the one that's remembered because of his betrayal of Jesus, because of how, he turned Jesus over to the authorities. But I want us to start with Judas because, a little bit earlier in the story, you see, Judas was called by God. He was called by Jesus to be one of his followers, and he followed him for several years in his ministry. And so we need to understand that about Judas, that Judas was somebody that he started off on the right path. He started out making some really good decisions. I guess he didn't have to go and follow Jesus, but he chose to. And so he made a lot of good decisions, but he also made some really bad decisions. Judas has a reputation of being someone that was greedy, of being someone that was looking out for his own benefit, his own good, and not necessarily always the benefit of others or of Christ himself. So, like we said, Judas has some character flaws, and he made some terrible mistakes. When we look there in the book of Matthew, starting in verse 20, in chapter 26, starting in verse 1, this is when Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified." And the chief priests and the elders of the people gathered in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and plotted together in order to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him. But they said, "Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people." So here, these high-ranking Jewish officials are looking for a way to kill Jesus. Now, nobody really would think that the way to kill Jesus, or the way to have Jesus be crucified, would be by the betrayal of one of those that was closest to him. Now, he might have not been the closest 3 or 4, but he was definitely, he's part of the chosen 12. And so here he was, and he was going to be the one that betrayed Jesus. So we come on down to verse 14 of chapter 26, and then it says, "Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, 'What would you give me if I deliver him over to you?' And they paid him 30 pieces of silver, and from that moment he sought an opportunity to betray him." And this is something I want us to notice. While we said that Judas had all kinds of character flaws and things that he struggled with, in this instance, he went to them, he sought after them, and then not only did he seek after them, he took a bribe, a payment, whatever you want to call it, for his services, for the services of delivering Jesus at the perfect moment, at the perfect place. And he kept looking for that moment. He kept searching for that moment. This was an intent in his heart that lingered. The number of hours or that he would have probably just been thinking about, how can I make this happen? He had to think about that. And that was something that I don't know, as an individual, I don't know how he could have let that thought just linger in his mind and keep going, while at the same time being right there beside Jesus. But he did. And he did that. And so we keep it going through. You have the institution of the Lord's Supper, all of those disciples there together. But I want to come on down to chapter 26, going down to verse 47, because here we're going to really just see the betrayal and arrest of Jesus. And it says, "While he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, with him a crowd and swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, 'The one I will kiss is the man, seize him.' And he came up to Jesus at once and said, 'Greetings, Rabbi.' And he kissed him. And Jesus said to him, 'Friend, do what you came to do.' Then they came up and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. And behold, one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, 'Put your sword back in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword.'" Here you have, the arrest of Jesus, and he's betrayed by a close friend. Jesus calls him a friend in this instance, and he comes up and he gives him a kiss. He says, "Greetings, Rabbi." This was his teacher. This was the one that he had followed. This is the one that he had been, loving for so many years, and yet he is betraying him. He's betraying him for some money. Now, we have all these bad things that Judas did that would show his greed and his selfishness. But then you go on down in the account, and what you see is that when you get in chapter 27, it finally dawns on Judas what he's done. It finally clicks in his head. And it says there in verse 3, then when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he changed his mind and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. They said, what is that to us? See to it yourself. And throwing down the pieces of silver in the temple, he departed and went and hanged himself. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, it is not lawful to put them back in the treasury, since it is blood money. So they took counsel and bought within the potter's field as a burial place for strangers. We can keep on looking about this field and what this field was used for, but Judas here, he started to do something really right. He goes back, he gives back the money, he tells him what he's done wrong. I wish he would have just stopped right there.
Yeah.
I wish that at that moment, that in him coming back, that he would have decided, you know what, this innocent man that I've led to be crucified, this innocent man will forgive me. But Judas didn't do that. Judas went on and took his own life. And so for certain people out there in the world, I would tell them, listen, know without a shadow of a doubt that the God that we serve, that the God of heaven, he can forgive us. And he will forgive us. I believe he would even have forgiven Judas had Judas come back to him and asked for that forgiveness. And so, Logan, we can learn a lot of lessons from Judas, and a lot of them are bad, but I think we can also see that that we have a God that we serve that is forgiving.
I think Judas was really, I've heard a story of whenever this little boy would be in trouble, his father would make him nail a hole into a piece of board. And then whenever the son or the boy would ask for forgiveness or right his wrong, he'd take the nail out.
Right.
But one thing that still remained was the hole. And I think Judas couldn't get over the hole that was still in the board.